Sunday dinner had always been a ritual in my family. Same house, same table, same rotation of dishes that hadn't changed in 20 years. I arrived at 5:00 p.m. sharp like always. The roast was already on the table, my mother's garlic mashed potatoes steaming in a chipped ceramic bowl. My father was pouring himself a glass of sweet tea. My older sister Caroline scrolled through her phone without looking up. My older brother Jeremy made a joke about the Red Sox game. Everything felt routine, until it wasn't. As I settled into my seat, I looked around at the people I had shared every holiday, every childhood milestone, and every hard conversation with. And still, I often felt like a visitor in my own family. Trying to join the conversation, I smiled and said casually, "I'm really excited for our big family cruise next month. I've been reading up on the excursions in the Bahamas." I wasn't fishing for approval. I was just trying to belong. Again. The room went quiet for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. Then Caroline snorted, without even looking up. "Oh, you thought you were coming." She glanced at Jeremy, who tried and failed to suppress a grin. The words hung there like smoke in the air. Not cruel in volume, but sharp in precision. Everyone chuckled. Even my dad. Even my mom, though she quickly looked away. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Right," I said. "Just kidding." I lifted my glass of water, took a slow sip, and kept smiling. But my chest felt like it was caving in. No one tried to correct her. No one said, "Of course you're coming." It was as if my presence had always been optional, something to be joked about, dismissed with a smirk. But what no one at that table realized was that I had already decided this would be the last Sunday dinner where I pretended not to notice. They thought they'd hurt me, and they had many times. But what they didn't know was that I had stopped hoping to be accepted. This time, I was simply confirming what I had already known. I was never really invited. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for someone to offer me a seat. My name is Elaine Martin. I'm 31 years old, a high school literature teacher, and the youngest of 3 siblings. I live alone in a small 2-bedroom apartment just outside of Portland, Oregon. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet, and it's mine. Growing up, I never caused trouble. I didn't break rules or test limits. I got good grades, came home on time, and helped out with chores without being asked. Caroline was the bold one, always in the spotlight, always dramatic. Jeremy was the jokester, loud and charming in that way that made adults forgive him for anything. And I was reliable. I learned early that being helpful earned polite praise, but not affection. I learned that staying quiet meant being overlooked, but speaking up rarely changed anything. My parents weren't unkind. They just had a way of shining their attention toward the louder people in the room. By high school, I had settled into the role of the background character in my own family. I was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who brought extra snacks to the lake house, who stayed late to clean up after Thanksgiving dinner. No one asked me to do those things. But when I didn't, it was noticed not through words, but through silence. When I got my teaching degree, I paid for it with scholarships, student loans, and part-time work. I didn't expect help. Caroline took a gap year in Europe that my parents partially funded. Jeremy changed majors 3 times and still got help with rent until he was 26. I graduated early and started teaching in the same district where I once sat in a desk as a teenager, taking notes, doing everything right. Even as an adult, the pattern never changed. At holidays, Caroline dominated every conversation. Jeremy told the same 5 stories with a new punchline each year. I filled water glasses and smiled. I brought thoughtful gifts and got re-gifted mugs in return. When I moved into my own place, my parents never visited. They called occasionally when they needed something. Still, I kept showing up. Not because I expected recognition, but because some part of me clung to the belief that consistency would one day be enough. That if I kept being good, reliable, generous, they would eventually see me. I joined in on family Zoom calls during the pandemic, even when I was the only one not talking over someone else. I took care of my mother's dog when she went to visit Caroline in New York. I filled out the paperwork when Jeremy needed a co-signer for a car loan not to sign, just to check if it made sense. I never asked for anything in return. But that didn't mean I didn't want to be wanted. I just learned to hide it better with each passing year. My siblings had careers that sounded impressive at parties. Caroline worked in PR for a luxury brand, traveled, often always wore something crisp and curated. Jeremy worked in sales, exactly what he sold, changed every few years, but he had the gift of charisma. I loved teaching, but I rarely talked about it at family dinners. It never held their interest. They called me the quiet one, the stable one, the one who had her life together. And maybe I did. But the truth is, I longed for something I could never quite name. Not admiration, not even inclusion. Just to be seen, to be counted without having to raise my hand. So when my parents mentioned planning a cruise a few months ago, I didn't assume anything. I had learned long ago not to. But then my mother asked if I could feed the cat while they were gone. And that's when I understood. They had planned this without me. Again, as always. That night, I stared at my phone for a long time. The group chat buzzed with packing lists and sunscreen recommendations. I hadn't been added. I never was. So the following Sunday, when I smiled and said, I'm really excited for our big family cruise, it wasn't an oversight. It was a test. And when Caroline laughed and said, oh, you thought it wasn't a surprise, it was confirmation of everything I already knew. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who know your name, your face, your history, and yet never truly see you. It's like screaming into a void that answers only with silence. After enough years, you stop screaming. You stop hoping for an echo. You just learn to exist inside the quiet. That's how it felt growing up in my family. When I was 10, I got second place in the district spelling bee. My parents couldn't make it because Jeremy had a baseball game and Caroline had a recital. No one said, we're proud of you, but let us know how it goes. It was simply, sorry, we'll hear about it later. I remember standing on that auditorium stage, scanning the audience, hoping to see someone familiar. I didn't. At 13, I won a statewide essay contest. I told my family over dinner. My dad nodded without looking up. Caroline changed the subject within seconds. My mom asked if I wanted more mashed potatoes. When I was 16, I got into a summer program at a university out of state. I worked weekends for 6 months to save up travel money. The night before I left, no one helped me pack. Jeremy borrowed the car and forgot to fill the tank. Caroline told me not to brag so much when I brought it up. These weren't cruel moments, they were ordinary ones. But it's in the ordinary that neglect leaves its deepest fingerprints. Holidays were always the same. I brought extra food, remembered everyone's favorite drinks. I wrapped gifts in ribbons and hand-wrote tags. My birthday was usually acknowledged 2 days late, sometimes not at all. One year, my mother called to ask if I could pick up a pie for Thanksgiving. I said yes, of course, and ended up baking one from scratch. No one mentioned it. And still, I showed up. For birthdays, for moving days, for hospital visits. For the baby shower I helped plan when Caroline didn't want to deal with details. I showed up with lists, with kindness, with effort. I showed up because I believed that loyalty meant something even if it went unnoticed. Even my work was invisible to them. I taught teenagers how to write, how to think, how to survive in a world that didn't always make room for them. I organized book drives, spent my own money on classroom supplies, stayed after hours for students who needed someone to talk to. But at family dinners, when someone asked how work was, it always meant Caroline's new contract or Jeremy's latest bonus. I'd answer in a few words and listen for the next 20 minutes. I thought maybe if I achieved enough, they'd start to pay attention. Maybe if I gave enough, they'd offer something back. But I've come to realize that some people only see you as far as they need to. No further. When the cruise plans started circulating, I wasn't surprised to be left out. Disappointed, yes, but not surprised. The thing is, my parents had never said, "You're not invited." They just never considered me in the first place. My mother texted to ask if I could pop in and water the plants while they were gone. Jeremy asked if he could borrow my travel adapter for his suitcase. Caroline made a post on Instagram about finally getting away with the people who matter most. I wasn't tagged, and so I smiled through it all, because that's what I'd always done until that Sunday dinner. Until I said the thing that forced them to reveal what had been true all along. The silence that followed my statement was a familiar kind. Heavy, but not shocking. And Caroline's response. It was the kind of cruelty that doesn't even register as cruelty to the person saying it. It was casual, tossed off, meant as a joke maybe, but only because she never thought her words had weight when it came to me. After dinner, I washed the dishes. No one stopped me. I wiped the counters, organized the leftovers, packed up a container to take home. No one said thank you. No one noticed the flush in my face or the way my hands shook slightly. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. In, out, in again. And in the quiet hum of my car, I realized something important. I had spent 3 decades trying to be part of a family that had already assigned me a role I never auditioned for. I was the reliable one, the helper, the extra, the one you could count on to bring ice or arrive early or stay late, but not the one you took photos with, not the one you called first, not the one you invited. And I finally saw it for what it was. Not an accident, not an oversight, a choice. One they had made a long time ago. So now I was ready to make a choice of my own. The decision to speak up at Sunday dinner hadn't been spontaneous. It was calculated, quietly rehearsed. A line I had practiced in my head during sleepless nights and long walks to the grocery store. I'm really excited for our big family cruise. I knew exactly how it would land. In the week leading up to that dinner, the group chat had been buzzing with cruise talk, flight times, luggage restrictions, sunscreen brands, cabin arrangements. I wasn't in the group, but Jeremy had accidentally mentioned a dinner reservation they'd made for one of the nights at sea. When I didn't respond, he followed up with, "Oh, Mom must have forgotten to loop you in." She hadn't forgotten. I was never meant to be included. Still, I smiled when I got the request from Mom to come feed her cat while they were gone. She said it as if I should be honored. "You always remember where the food is, Elaine. You're so organized." As if that were my defining role. The one who remembers where things go. I said yes, of course. I always did. But that week, I also began sorting through my drawers, boxing up old notebooks, clearing out digital clutter. I told no one. Not because I was being secretive, but because I knew no one would ask. When Sunday rolled around, I brought a homemade tart, garnished it with lemon zest, and placed it carefully on my mother's favorite cake stand. Caroline didn't look up when I entered. Jeremy greeted me with his usual sideways hug, already mid-story about an annoying coworker. Dad talked over everyone as he carved the roast. And then, over mashed potatoes and polite conversation, I laid the line down like a card on a table. I'm really excited for our big family cruise next month. The silence that followed was my answer. It was brief, but meaningful. In the span of one breath, I watched every face flicker with confusion, amusement, then dismissal. "Oh, you thought you were coming." Caroline didn't even say it cruelly. She said it like someone pointing out that the sky was blue. That's how sure she was. How unsurprised. And in that moment, I felt a strange sort of clarity. There was no anger, no swelling of heartbreak or panic. Just confirmation. A full circle click in my chest that said, "You were right." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't ask why. Because I already knew. What I had done wasn't an appeal. It wasn't a last-ditch effort to be included. It was a test. And they had passed with flying colors. They confirmed, without knowing it, that I was never really part of the picture. That I had been convenient, useful, expected to fill the edges, but never allowed to take up space in the center. As I drove home that night, I replayed the scene not with grief, but with quiet resolve. I had given them every chance, every opportunity over the years to choose me. Now I was choosing myself. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of distress, but because my mind was finally still enough to let clarity surface. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped in a cardigan I'd had since college, sipping lukewarm tea. The apartment was quiet. The only light came from a small lamp beside the bookshelf. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had happened. But something had. Something small, almost invisible, like the final thread snapping on a fraying rope. And I knew exactly what to do. For years, I had hovered at the edges of a family that never really invited me in. I had played the supporting role, showed up without being asked, offered help no one requested, but everyone expected. I had wanted so badly to be part of something of them that I never stopped to ask if I should be. Now I was done waiting. I opened my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor. Then I began typing. A list. It wasn't a revenge plan. It wasn't even dramatic. It was simply a blueprint for moving forward quietly and completely. Step 1. Submit my resignation. I had been teaching for 9 years. I loved the students, loved the work. But I had been itching for a change, something smaller, quieter, slower. I'd long dreamed of moving to a coastal town, taking a part-time position at a community school, maybe even starting a little side business editing college essays. I had a savings account, no debt, and nowhere I truly belonged. So why not now? Step 2. Find a place to go. I looked up small towns along the Oregon coast. I found one with a bookstore, a farmer's market, and a rental cabin available month to month. It wasn't fancy, but it looked like peace. I bookmarked the listing. Step 3. Close the loops. I emailed my landlord, checked the lease terms. I had 3 more weeks. Perfect timing. I started going through my apartment room by room. Not packing yet, just sorting. Deciding what I needed, what I didn't, what parts of my life were worth carrying into whatever came next. And then came the hardest part. Step 4. Disconnect. I opened the group text labeled Family, which I had never named. I scrolled through months of messages, reminders, jokes, links to memes. I never responded to photos I was never in. I didn't leave the group. I simply muted it. Then I removed location sharing. I turned off read receipts. I changed my voicemail to a generic recording. Finally, I drafted a short email to my school principal. I didn't send it yet. I wanted 1 more week to be sure. But in my heart, I already was. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. I took a long walk before sunrise, letting the wind sting my face. It felt like a baptism, like a soft reset. As the week went on, I kept moving forward. I made lists, I scheduled appointments, I called the cabin owner and reserved it for the month after the cruise. I told my boss I'd be taking a few personal days around that time, nothing urgent, just some overdue rest. She nodded, understanding. What struck me most wasn't the sense of fear. It was the calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop trying to force your way into spaces not built for you. I knew my family would go on their cruise as planned. They would laugh, drink, take photos. They wouldn't notice my silence, not at first. Maybe not at all. But that was the point. I wasn't trying to punish them. I was letting go. Letting go of the version of me that kept showing up for people who didn't look for her. Letting go of the hope that one day they would treat me as someone who mattered simply because I existed. I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew it wouldn't involve sitting at the same table year after year hoping to be chosen. I was choosing myself, quietly, fully, and this time I wouldn't ask for permission. The weekend of the cruise arrived without fanfare. On Friday afternoon, I received one last message from my mom. Don't forget to feed Mittens. The key is still under the flower pot. Thank you, sweetheart. There was no mention of the cruise itself. No wish you were coming, no photo of packed bags or excited emojis, just instructions as always. I replied, "Of course. Safe travels. I meant it." That same day, I handed in my resignation. My principal was surprised but kind. I told her I'd found an opportunity in a smaller town, one where I could slow down, focus on what mattered. She nodded and said she'd miss me. I believed her. Afterwards, I stopped by my apartment for one last check. I had boxed up what I needed and donated the rest. The space felt bare, but not empty, just ready. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb. Left a message on my voicemail saying I was away for a while and took one final walk through the neighborhood that had carried me quietly through the last chapter of my life. Then I drove. 3 hours up the coast, through winding roads and tall trees until I reached the cabin I had rented, a small A-frame tucked between evergreens with a front porch facing the ocean. There was no Wi-Fi. Cell signal was spotty. Perfect. I brought in my bags, made a cup of tea, and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was beginning to dip into the water, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and lavender. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like salt and pine. My shoulders dropped in a way I hadn't realized they were tense. Inside, I placed my phone in a drawer and didn't touch it for the rest of the evening. The next morning, I woke without an alarm. I made breakfast, read a book, took a walk along the cliffside trail. There were no voices around me, no obligations, no invisible performance to maintain, just breath and light and quiet. I imagined somewhere far away my family boarding their flight, laughing, complaining about TSA, taking selfies in the airport lounge. They wouldn't notice my silence, not yet. They would assume I was feeding the cat, running errands, being responsible. They wouldn't realize until they came home that I had already left and that I wasn't coming back. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the wind move through the trees. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt whole. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I had made my own, to my own life, and I had accepted it. By the fourth day of their cruise, the texts started. At first, they were casual. "Mom, Mittens is doing okay, right? Haven't heard from you. Just checking in." Caroline, "Hey, can you grab a few things from the mail pile? I'm expecting a package from Sephora." Jeremy, "Just wanted to make sure you didn't forget the garbage days switched. Monday now, not Thursday." I didn't respond. I was sitting on the porch sipping coffee and watching gulls dance over the surf. The tide moved in and out, constant and undemanding. I had spent the morning sketching wildflowers in my journal and planning a visit to the local farmer's market. I wasn't ignoring them out of spite. I just wasn't available anymore. 2 more days passed. The texts grew more persistent. "Mom, sweetheart, I'm a little worried. Are you all right? Can you just send a thumbs up or something? Jeremy, did your phone break? Caroline says your texts aren't delivering." Caroline, "Are you ghosting the family? Not cute." Still, I said nothing. That evening, I walked along the rocky shoreline as the sun sank into the sea. I picked up a piece of sea glass smoothed by years of waves and slipped it into my pocket. I liked the way it caught the light, still sharp once probably, but now softened, worn in, whole in a new way. On the day they returned home, the messages changed. "Mom, Elaine, we're back. Mittens is fine, but you didn't leave the spare key. Did something happen?" Jeremy, "You around? Mom's kind of freaking out." Caroline, "So what, you just disappeared?" Seriously, I imagined them stepping into their houses, expecting me to have done everything as always. Watered the plants, sorted the mail, kept the house in order, found the box they forgot to pack, solved the things they didn't want to deal with. And instead, silence. Eventually, the phone rang. I didn't answer. I listened to the voicemail instead. My mother's voice trembled. "Elaine, please call me. I don't understand what's going on. You're not answering anyone. If we did something wrong, if I did, please just call." That night, I sat at the cabin table and wrote a letter. Not to be sent, just for me. Dear family, you probably don't know the moment I stopped feeling like part of you. That's okay. I can't name it either. It wasn't one big hurt. It was 100 small ones. 1,000 moments where I was standing right there and no one turned toward me. I tried. For years, I tried to be visible. I stayed helpful. I stayed kind. I showed up when it was inconvenient. I gave without asking for anything back. I thought maybe someday someone would notice. You didn't. And so I'm doing now what I should have done a long time ago. I'm not slamming a door. I'm not trying to punish anyone. I'm just walking away. Not in anger, but in peace. Love, Elaine. I folded the letter, placed it in my journal, and went to bed with the windows open. The wind moved gently through the trees, a quiet lullaby. They would keep calling for a while. Maybe sending guilt-laced texts. Maybe even driving to my apartment eventually, only to find the mailbox empty, the key on the kitchen counter, the walls stripped bare. And maybe, just maybe, when they stood in that quiet, they'd feel it. The space I used to fill. Not loudly, but fully. And now gone. I didn't leave a dramatic note taped to the fridge. There was no cinematic goodbye, no tear-stained envelope addressed to Mom and Dad. That's never been my style. Instead, I left one simple thing, a letter, folded neatly, placed inside a manila envelope, tucked into the center of the dining table at my apartment, the key resting on top. It wasn't long, just the truth. Mom, Dad, Caroline, Jeremy. If you're reading this, it means you've come looking. And that alone already means more than most things that came before. I want to start by saying I'm okay. Truly. I'm not in danger. I haven't fallen off the edge of anything. I didn't run away. I simply left. And not from a place, from a pattern. For most of my life, I've been the quiet one, the dependable one. The one who says yes, the one who shows up, the one who stays late and cleans up what no one else wants to touch. I did it because I believed deep down that if I gave enough, I'd eventually be invited into the center of things. But the truth is, some seats at the table are never set for you. And I got tired of standing on the edges waiting for someone to notice I was cold. This isn't about one cruise. It's not even about the joke at dinner, though. That certainly held a mirror up to something I needed to see. It's about years of being useful, but not valued. Present, but not truly seen. I'm not writing this to shame you. I don't need apologies or explanations. I'm writing it so you'll understand why I won't be home next Sunday. Or the one after that. I'm writing it because I love you. But I love me too. And I'm learning to listen to the part of me that's been whispering for years. You don't have to keep trying so hard to be loved. I don't expect you to change. I'm not asking you to. But I won't keep showing up in a place where I'm only tolerated, not cherished. So I've stepped away, quietly, on purpose. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come to understand not what you did, but what you didn't do. The small silences, the missed chances, the spaces where I could have been welcomed but was left standing alone. Take care of yourselves. Tell Mittens I said hello. Elaine. No signature flourish. No PS. Just the letter and the key. I didn't watch for their reaction. I wasn't interested in what they'd say in that first rush of reading. I knew they'd be shocked, confused, maybe even angry. But underneath all that, I hoped quietly, without urgency, that they'd feel the truth I had left behind, that I had been there all along. And now I wasn't. 6 months passed like seasons in fast forward. The coastal town I'd moved to was quiet in all the best ways. A 2-lane road led into it, framed by redwood trees and wild blackberry bushes. The kind of place where people still waved when they passed you on the street, where the grocery store clerk remembered your name after your 3rd visit, where nobody asked too many questions unless you wanted them to. I rented a small cottage with weathered shingles and a garden out back that came alive in spring. The walls smelled faintly of old pine. The windows let in light that made morning tea feel like ceremony. It wasn't much, but it was more than enough. I taught part-time at the local adult learning center, writing classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, helping seniors put together memoirs or poetry chapbooks. It was a different kind of teaching than I'd done before, slower, more intimate. No grades, no rush, just people sharing stories that had waited decades to be heard. It suited me. The days moved gently. I planted herbs, I took long walks, I read novels from the town library and left notes in the margins of borrowed books for the next reader to find. I baked more. I went whole days without speaking to anyone, and I never once felt alone. There were moments, of course, when I missed the noise, when I wondered what they were doing, if Caroline was still traveling, if Jeremy was still chasing the next promotion, if Mom had figured out how to turn on speakerphone, if Dad had said anything at all. But I didn't reach out. I didn't unblock their numbers or check their social media. I let silence be what it was honest. Then one rainy Saturday morning, I opened my mailbox to find a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a card, handwritten. Jeremy's handwriting. Elaine, I don't know if this will reach you. I don't even know if you want to hear from me, but I wanted to say I get it now. Maybe not everything, but enough. The cruise. That wasn't about you not being invited. It was about how we never really made room for you in anything. I'm sorry. Deeply. Fully. You were always the one holding everything together. We just never noticed. Until you weren't there. I hope you're okay. If you ever want to talk, just say the word. I'll come to you. No questions. Jeremy. I sat with the card for a long time, not crying, just still. The next day, I walked to the cafe and ordered a tea to go. I brought a small notebook and wrote in it until my hand cramped. I wrote about the garden, about the gulls, about how quiet has a shape to it if you sit still long enough. Then I wrote one line that stayed with me. You don't owe anyone your presence when they've only ever noticed your absence. That night, I lit a candle and placed Jeremy's card in a small wooden box where I kept other letters. Some never sent, others written only to myself. I didn't respond. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. Some gestures don't need answers right away. Some need time to become real. A few weeks later, I received an email from my former school principal. She just wanted to check in, she said. They were hiring again. Would I ever consider coming back? I smiled as I read it, but I already knew the answer. This new life I'd built, it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. But it was mine, authored by me, free of the quiet resentment I used to carry like a coat I couldn't take off. Here I had started to belong to myself. That spring, I planted tomatoes and basil in the garden. I started a writing group with some of my students. I adopted an old cat from the shelter, one with a torn ear and a grumpy disposition. I named him Jasper. Sometimes I imagined what would happen if I walked back into a Sunday dinner now, if I sat down at the table with new eyes, new strength. But then I realized I didn't need that table anymore. I had built my own. Small, sturdy, with mismatched chairs and enough space for anyone who came in peace. Maybe one day someone from my old life would find their way to it. But for now, it was enough that I had. No more waiting to be chosen, no more asking to be seen, just living, fully, quietly, and on my own terms. The first Sunday in October arrived with a crisp wind and golden light that filtered through the trees like it had something to say. I stood in my kitchen, sipping black tea, watching Jasper sunbathe in a warm patch of light by the door. It was the kind of morning I used to spend planning what dessert to bring to family dinner, what time to leave so I wouldn't be late, what polite smiles to wear so the silence wouldn't feel so loud. But this morning, there was no rush, no noise, just stillness and peace. Sometimes I still think about the last time I sat at my family's table, the way they laughed so easily without noticing the weight of their words, the way no one looked up when Caroline said, Oh, you thought like it was the most natural thing in the world. It's funny how one sentence can cut open a truth that's been trying to surface for years. They didn't mean to be cruel. That's the thing. They were simply careless, comfortable in the roles they had cast, unbothered by how tightly those roles fit or how suffocating they'd become for someone like me. And I had stayed for years, hoping, quietly aching, believing that if I kept being good, dependable, invisible, I'd one day be offered a seat that actually belonged to me. Instead, I was handed errands, obligations, and once a house key taped to a note that said, "Thanks." I don't hate them. That surprises people when I say it even to myself. But I don't. Hate would be too easy, too loud. What I feel is more like weathered clarity, like the shape of a pebble softened by decades in a tide pool, rounded, smooth, unburdened. I learned something important these past months. You can't force closeness with people who only know how to need you, not value you. You can't keep giving love in the hopes it'll be mirrored back. Sometimes the mirror is broken. Sometimes it's just not there. And walking away isn't failure, it's wisdom. It's not bitterness, it's survival. I didn't disappear because I wanted revenge. I left because I wanted to stop asking the same question and getting silence for an answer. Since then, small things have started to heal me. Conversations with strangers who look me in the eye. Sunrises over the ocean that remind me I'm part of something vast. A student who told me, "You're the first teacher who made me feel like my words matter." Letters in my mailbox written in careful cursive. Jasper curled at my feet, reminding me that companionship can exist without words. Jeremy's card still sits in my wooden box. I haven't replied, but I might, one day, when it doesn't feel like reopening a wound but honoring a boundary. As for Caroline, I haven't heard from her. Mom texted once in June. "I hope you're well. We miss you." No demands, no guilt, just 7 words. I didn't reply, but I saved the message. Because even though I'm not ready to sit at that table again, I can still appreciate the softness of someone finally knocking instead of barging in. I imagine years from now someone asking me why I left, why I didn't fight harder to be included. And I'll say, because I was tired of earning a place I should have been given without question. Because I chose peace over performance. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away without slamming the door. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped standing on it hoping someone would walk across. And if they ever do, if they come quietly, carefully, with hands not full of excuses but honesty, then maybe I'll meet them halfway. But I won't be waiting. I'll be living, tending to my garden, making tea, teaching stories, telling my own, and building a life where I am never, ever a second thought again.